Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. If you saw the update yesterday, you know that everyone is getting a Moonlight Connection hero. So we're going to go over those 6 heroes today so that you know which one to pick. Before we get into it though, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, please check the video description below for a link to my Discord. Okay, so the Moonlight Connection is available to everyone after completing Episode 1, Sanctuary Gate Underground. I forget exactly what stage that is in Episode 1, it may be the very last one, I'm not sure. So at some point in Episode 1, after clearing, through it, you will be able to select one of these 6 heroes: Arbiter Vildrid, ML5, Dark Corvus, Ruele of Light, Spectre Tenebria, and Judge Kise. So since this is, a very exciting topic and a lot of people do not have some of these heroes, I thought I would go through each one and we'll go over them systematically, talking about how you will use them in PvE, how you can use them in the different aspects of PvP, and who you should pull for depending on, what your goals in the game are. This is a little infographic they gave us showing a preview of how this system will work. Once unlocking it, it looks like you pick one, of the heroes that you want, and you have to complete various, achievement type tasks in order to fully unlock them. And I think until they're fully unlocked, you will not be able to use them in RTA, or in potentially all phases of the game. So they show RB here, and it doesn't look really too bad. Getting to gold in arena, promoting a 6-star hero twice, acquire 3 stages in all chapters of Episode 1 Epilogue Unrecorded Story, and awaken a 3-star hero to 5-star awakening or higher 3 times. These are all things that, new heirs will be able to complete, I think, without too much difficulty. It might take a little bit of time, but it's going to make these heroes really accessible to everybody. They also said that if you pick a hero you already have, you get 10 galaxy coins, so players that have all the heroes, or if they, don't want one of the heroes, they can pick one that they already have. You're at least getting a little something. It's not as cool as getting an ML5 you didn't have access to before, but it is at least, a small benefit. Okay, so now that we've gone over how we acquire the ML Connection hero, we can talk about each one individually. I think we'll start with Arbiter Vildrid first because he is arguably one of the most wanted heroes for new and veteran players alike. So I think we'll discuss how you can use these heroes in the different parts of the game, and then that will inform how we build them. So Arbiter Vildrid is a hero that has numerous uses. We'll start with PvE. He is a fantastic farmer in World. If you go and you're a new player and you want to farm catalysts here, either in the side story or in the main story or in Unrecorded History for additional catalysts, then Arbiter Vildrid is, I think, arguably the best farmer in the game. The reason why he is such a great farmer is his skill 3 animation is incredibly short, which means that he is going to dish out a ton of damage in a very quick amount of time and clear stages very quickly, which will allow you to quickly farm catalysts, level up heroes, etc. His S3 is an AoE ability, and if it kills something, it resets the cooldown. So that's pretty insane, and he will just continue to S3, S3, S3 as he clears out the entire, stage with ease. If he does die, he comes back and nukes even harder, which is also crazy from his passive. So I think from a PvE perspective, he's amazing there. There are a few other areas of PvE that you could use Arbiter Vildrid in. Raid, for example, the Labyrinth, either in, I guess normal you can use pretty much anyone, so that doesn't really matter, but for Hell difficulty, I believe it's Secretary Vera boss, you can use him there pretty well, because that boss wants high AoE damage, so I tend to bring Arbiter Vildrid and Kayron for this boss, and just nuke him down, so you can use him there as well. There are several stages, probably in Abyss, where you could use RB, so he's useful in Abyss sometimes. I wouldn't say he's necessary, it's just he's going to make that easy for you. He quickly farms Spirit Altar, he quickly farms Side Story like we mentioned. You don't really use RB in Hunts too much, and I guess you could use him in Hall of Trials, but he's probably not your main one. I think the main thing about RB that's so impressive is he clears things so quickly. He rapidly increases your progress in the early game. He makes the early game really, really easy. And I think if you are a brand new player, RB is arguably your best selection, just because he will really blow through that PvE content in short order. So that's how I would use RB in PvE. In terms of building him for PvE, you basically just have to build him on damage. you don't need all this speed. You can build him at like 170 speed on, like one of the free sets they give you, like a free attack set or something, and just as much, attack and crit damage as you can manage, and he'll, clear through world stages super fast. So what about PvP? How can we use RB for PvP? Well, in PvP you have Arena, and he's fairly popular on Arena defense. You do see him sometimes. He's fallen off of the meta a little bit there, but he may be back. And if you put him on Arena defense, you can use, like Moonlight Dreamblade, and build him thick is an option, kind of how I have this RB built. You might want him on counter for that. If you want to use him on Arena offense, I think that is something you could do in the early game. Eventually you're probably going to have to use different heroes as you climb further up and need more specific answers, but certainly in the beginning he's just going to blow through a lot of that content fast. For Guild Wars, RB is a really popular Arena defense unit, and again, probably building him tanky might be better unless you have a speed comp. The Arena offense teams, where I see him used sometimes, are if you just want to clear it out really fast and you don't mind taking a bit of risk. He's a great offensive hero there as well. And, just overall, he does so much damage, it's really easy to slot him in on your team and just nuke the enemy down. Very frequently, if the enemy team has an RB, I can bring my own RB and a Moonlight Haste, and I just combo them together, and my RB will kill their RB, and I will get the shield from Moonlight Haste, and then my RB doesn't die, and so it's a pretty easy win. So that is one potential way that you could use him. For RTA, he has multiple builds as well. This build right here is one I use for RTA, and it's a pretty standard offensive build. This build is speed tuned around 240 speed. The reason why you want him this fast is you want him going before a lot of tanks that will put up defense buff, and so having him at 240 speed allows you to get your first skill 3 off before that happens. So that's pretty valuable. Some people put him at 250, and that's an option as well, or maybe even 255. And I think the exact speed you put him at is actually going to vary throughout the season. It's going to depend on how fast everyone else is running their heroes. Right now I feel like I can get away with 240. If I notice that people start outspeeding me a lot on the opener, I'll bump him up to 250, for example. And then once you get him to that speed, you want 100% crit chance and then as much damage as you can possibly get. I would say the minimum numbers to make him effective would be about 270, 280 crit damage where I have him here, and about 4,200 attack. So my damage on him is, I think, probably a little on the low side. People have some really crazy speed damage RBs out there. You obviously want Alexa Basket on this build, because if he procs greater attack, it's just absolutely absurd and he'll kill everything. So Alexa is the easy choice for this particular build. The only other thing to mention is immunity, which I run on him right now, and I think I've found a lot of value in doing so. There's a lot of things that, if they do happen to go before you, can really screw you up if you don't have immunity, but if you do, it's like they don't matter at all. Examples would be like a Lilius pushback or a Cerise stun, something like that. If they go before you and they stun your RB, or they provoke him, or they push him back, or whatever, then that's really bad news, and you've just lost a tremendous amount of value. So that's how I run him. I've seen other people run speed RB around like 200 or 220, and they're basically just speed tuning him with a type of cleave team, like a Bassar type thing where they're just running people over, and they'll build a lot more damage on him, and I think that's totally fine as well. It just kind of depends on how you want to run him. So that's speed RB. Another option is tanky RB, which is how this guy is built. For tanky RB, I like speed tuning him around 170, and the reason I like this speed is because it allows you to get sufficient bulk and damage without completely sacrificing your ability to take turns. Something I've noticed from the slower or degen RBs that people run is they can be built so slow, at base speed almost, that he basically never takes a turn, and so he can just get ignored. If those people build him on counter, they're hoping that he'll be proccing counterattack and stuff, but if they just don't hit him, then they can take out the rest of your team, and then RB's in a spot where he hasn't really done much damage up to that point, and they can usually just nuke him down. So I prefer the tankier version around 170 speed, and because I want him tanky and at that speed, I have to run speed set. You can't get these stats on counter. You'd have to give up some damage, some tank, or some speed. You just can't have it all. So I elected not to run counter on him. I think you could, it's an option. And then beyond that, I wanted this bulk, so like 14k HP and about 1350 defense, and once I got that, I just got as much damage as I could. And I think this RB is really useful in certain scenarios. I put a video out about having two different RBs and how I use them, so you can check my video history. I can also post a link for that in the video description if you want to see example matches of me using both of these RBs in different types of RTA games. why I pick each one, etc. But the long and short of it is that I'll pick this RB into cleave teams, for example, or I can pick him as a bruiser in a longer drawn-out fight with units like Adventurer Ross who can dual attack with him and kind of negate the fact that he's really slow, and still good value. For this RB, I prefer Moonlight Dreamblade. You could put Basket on him. I think that would be fine. It would help your damage. I like Dreamblade just because if you take him into cleave teams and you get a Dreamblade proc, that can just win you the game right there, and that's really strong. This RB needs to be on immunity, I think, because he's so slow. If he was not on immunity, he would just get abused by everybody, stunned, provoked, etc. He would never do anything. So having immunity on this RB is really key. So that is Arbiter Vildrid in a nutshell. I think if you're a brand new player, then this is probably your number one pick for which of the selectors you should choose. So next up we can talk about ML who is a hero that has not gotten a whole lot of love recently. ML is a hero who was like super OP when the game kind of first came out because there weren't really answers to him built in, and he was just such a problem. He would just literally counter and kill people, and it felt like there was nothing you could do about it. As the game has progressed, there are now many answers for ML. For example, Spectre Tenebria just destroys him, since her attack can't be countered. ML basically revolves around his passive, where he has a chance to counterattack just built into his kit, and it's a 100% chance to counterattack when he's crit, so DPS units basically just get impaled on him, since he does quite a bit of damage on that counterattack. And his skill 3 can defense break, which can be nice. His skill 1 can decrease attack. So overall, he is an interesting hero that saw a lot of use when the game was early, but now that they're heroes that avoid the counterattack thing, it is very easy to play around him, and it's difficult to use him as a result. I can't really think of a single PvE encounter where he substantially increases your ability to clear that content without, or rather, that you couldn't just do with another hero. He's kind of, I guess, a gimmick in PvE. The few places I've seen him used are like people with an ML will put them on their friends list, and they will let new players use him to clear out some of the more difficult, like early boss encounters and story mission, since he can just solo them. But we've reached a point in our gear now where almost any, ML5 can do that, like RB, etc. We have enough damage now that we have 90 gear to just explode those enemies. So ML isn't really even necessary there anymore. In terms of PvP, he used to be used on like arena defense teams and stuff. And that's super fallen off. He's just not really there anymore. Likewise, in Guild War defense, you just don't see him. You can still use him on Guild War offense, specifically against like Arbiter Vildrids or people with AoE abilities, because that they're not going to be able to play around him. Like, they have their fixed team, so you can bring him into RBs, you can bring him into I guess just any other hero with AoE. Not Landy, because she can't be countered attacked on her AoE, but things like RB would work. And on World Arena, he is sometimes a niche pick that can be used against cleavers, or against people with a lot of AoE heroes, and that's kind of how I have mine built. For both Guild War Offense and World Arena, or RTA, you could build him the same way like this. You basically put him at base speed, and you give him immunity, which is very important, and then you totally ignore crit for the most part. I think I do have... This ring is on crit. Yeah, I could swap this crit out to something else, and that would make him better. And the reason why you ignore crit is because his counterattack always crits. It's guaranteed to crit. So you don't need to build him with crit. You can take those stats and put them elsewhere. And I wanted to give him like kind of around this amount of damage. It's basically just enough to kill a squishy target like an RB, without significant mitigation, because I'm picking him into cleave type setups. And then I wanted him as bulky as possible. So 18k HP and 1400 defense. And with this bulk, I wanted some effect res. I was shooting for 150, and I'll get there whenever he gets triple S'd, but I'm not going to like wail on a Ken banner to make that happen. Just eventually, if I pull Ken's, he'll become triple S. 150 ER I think is a reasonable amount of ER. It's going to prevent things like RB blind, Spectre Tenebria stuns, etc., and will help him do his job. Artifact-wise, Sigurd Scythe is, I think, one of the best in slots for him, since it allows him to heal up after he takes damage on his counterattack, and that's what gives him like that solo potential against cleaver type teams. Even against those type of teams, it can be very awkward, because if they bring a hero like Cdom, she can honestly just one-shot him, even with this bulk. So you have to kind of pick and choose your moments. There's very niche scenarios where you can draft him. When you can draft him, he works fine, but those are very niche. I would not recommend picking ML Ken out of these selector heroes. Maybe if he gets buffed, he might be usable, but as it stands now, I don't think he's your best choice. Okay, next up we have Dark Corvus, who is not built, I just realized, so we can quickly throw some gear on him and I can show you an example of how I would use him. In PvE, doesn't really have a use, so you don't really need to build him there. For PvP, he does have some uses, and they're mainly on offense teams. You can use him on arena offense to beat pretty much anything. The problem is that he just takes a while. So, and the same goes for Guild War offense. He can beat pretty much any team. The idea is that you build him super tanky with some effect resistance, and eventually his skill 3 goes off and he just one-shot something, and then you just keep doing that. You tend to bring him along with an Aureus Holding Knight, like Blue Crow for example, and a healer with effect resistance like Fire Acades, who has a high healing output, and that'll just keep your team alive until Dark Corvus has his skill 3 available, and he nukes a target, and then you just rinse and repeat. It's pretty straightforward. The passive he has here is that whenever he gets hit, it decreases the skill cooldown on his S3 by 1, and if it's a crit, it goes down by 2. So, you know, you ideally take him into AoE teams, and it'll decrease his skill 3 even faster, but you honestly don't need to. You can just sit there and wait in a arena offense or Guild War offense scenario. In RTA, you could potentially draft him, but it's a little difficult since the new frenzy changes make effect resistance go down, which is kind of a bummer. So he's not super draftable in RTA. That said, I've seen it done by some people, so it is possible. So the way I would build him is honestly with like your just free HP gear probably, and you can just throw that on him. Geez, I thought I had more of this, but yeah, like this for example. You know, I guess we could just use maybe, yeah, let's use the HP and just like speed set gear or something like that. And you just want to make him tanky, so you can throw like health and effect resistance on him. And I'm just going to pick like random pieces here. He doesn't need to be perfect for the purposes of using him in Guild War offense or defense. Let's see. His ER is on the low side, so we can give him maybe an ER ring with a bunch of health. So like this, for example. Yeah, this would be fine. So here you can see he has about 180 speed, so he'll rotate through fine. You could even build him more slowly if you wanted for Guild War. He doesn't need to be this fast. You could drop him down to like 150 or something, and it would probably be okay. His effect resistance, you know, you could put it higher. You could put it at like 150. This is probably fine, to be honest, especially if you're bringing him with a high ER cleanser. And then you just want to make him tanky. So around 28 to 30k HP and some defense so that he doesn't die. So this would be a perfectly serviceable build for Guild War offense, for example. In terms of his artifacts, if you leave his ER that low, I would probably run him on Timeless Anchor. Whenever he gets hit, there's a chance to dispel, you know, a debuff. And if you build him with a little more ER, you could probably just run Strack Gauntlet and get his ER super high. You know, this will give him another 60%. So if you get him to like 150 ER, then you could run Strack, which would put him at like 210, and then he's going to resist most things. So that's definitely an option as well. The amount of ER you give him will increase the variety of teams you can take him into. If you leave him at like 110 ER, it might be hard to take him into comps with like Fairy Tail Tenebria, for example, who oftentimes runs up to like 200 effectiveness. For that type of comp, I would probably just bring him in with Timeless Anchor and then bring like a super high ER cleanser or something like that, and like a Dilibet maybe, I don't know. It would depend on the comp. So that way I wouldn't have to rebuild him every single time, and I could just put him on, you know, kind of secondary gear. So I think Dark Corvus could be a potentially viable pick out of the selectors for you if you want a answer to Guild War. He'll literally beat anything. It's, you know, it basically turns Guild War into easy mode. You know, if you're in a guild that takes Guild War really seriously and you guys are pushing up, Dark Corvus could be a serious contender for your pick. Okay, next up we have Ruele of Light. She is one of the premier Moonlight 5, you know, res healers that can resurrect people. Her skill 3 is pretty OP, brings anybody back and gives them invincibility for one turn. Her skill 2 is a super strong heal with a barrier to boot. Her skill 1 is a small heal, and then you can soul burn it for a team-wide big heal. So she's a pretty, simple, straightforward character, but her kit is really good. She has uses in PvE content. For example, there are multiple Abyss floors where using Ruele is really important. I used her to beat floor 105, for example, which is that like horrendous floor, I think, with Bloodbraid Karen. She's useful for, I think, the first phase because like the boss will like one-shot your units or something. You just have to bring them back. So she's good there. She can, be used in other areas of the game as well. She can, really trivialize some PvE encounters early on since, if your hero dies, it's just like a wipe, but she can just bring him back and kind of, alleviate that. So I think she would help your early PvE progression if you wanted to get her, for that purpose. She's not going to help you as much as Arbiter Vildrid, but, she would aid you in those goals. So in terms of PvP, Ruele is a hero that has a variety of uses. She's really strong on offensive teams, to counter certain types of units. You can bring her in if the unit, for example, has like a Little Queen Charlotte and they're going to nuke down one of your dark units. You can just use Ruele and bring it right back, and then it's no big deal. The other types of scenarios you could use her in, like Arena, for example, or GVG, would be on a defense team, potentially. You could put her on there to res a unit as well. I've seen some people use Ruele on defense. I don't think it's the greatest, but it is an option. I see more often people using her on Guild War offense teams, just because she's so strong there. The ability to bring back a hero so that you don't lose them for the subsequent fights is really strong. So Ruele is quite good for GVG offense. In terms of RTA, Ruele is a hero that is still picked pretty frequently. She's really strong there. She pairs really well with Blue Crow, and she's one of those heroes that will constantly come in and out of the meta, I think. When the meta slows down a bit, Ruele can be really good. It prevents people from using units like LQC to just snipe out a unit right out the gate. I like putting her on Wondrous Potion Vial because Ruele's weakness, or one of her weaknesses, is that she doesn't really have any dispels, and so people might try to provoke lock her or something like that, and the Potion Vial really helps prevent that from happening. In terms of her build, you basically just want to build her thick. I have her at like 18.5k HP with about 2100 defense, and I think this is okay. Okay bulk. I'd like her a little thicker. Around 200 speed is good, just so she turn cycles, and then about 150 ER is, I think, where you want her just to prevent provokes and things like that. So I think Ruele would be a really solid pick if you're kind of in that like later game PvP stage, and either you already have Arbiter Vildrid, for example, or if you're the type of player that doesn't really use RB, you're more of a defensive tank type player, Ruele can be really valuable for you. Okay, next up we have Spectre Tenebria. Spectre Tenebria is one of the premier ML5 DPS units, along with Arbiter Vildrid, and if you don't pick him, there's a good chance you're taking Specteni. She is useful in both PvE and PvP. In PvE, she is phenomenal at various Abyss floors. She's really good there. She is phenomenal in Hall of Trials, for example. She is also useful in clearing various hunts. She can be really good there. Like I use her in my Azimatic 13 run, for example. I can show you the team that I use. Let's see, battle. So in Azimatic 13, I run a 3-man team. ML Haste, Tamarin, and Spectre Tenebria, and then this 4th slot I can put in whoever I want, so I just put in whoever I'm currently grinding friendship for. But this team will clear out Azimatic 13 really easily. It makes it a walk in the park, so she's useful there. And as I mentioned before, Hall of Trials, she's really good when, mages are kind of the favored class. Abyss, she makes all that really easy. She could be used as a farmer in PvE, but there's so many heroes that do that, there's kind of no point in using her for that purpose. For PvP, you don't see her so much on defense teams. Occasionally on Guild War defense, you'll see her, but I don't think she's good there. You do use her a ton on offense, so in Arena, for example, you can run her with like Dain and Falconer Clury, and that will kill a lot of teams. You basically defense break something with Falconer Clury, and then you use the attack buff from Dain to skill 3 a unit, and it will just one-shot almost anything. She does a lot of damage. In Guild War, she's also extremely useful because you can bring her with a tank like Crow and Ruele, and then she can just sit back behind Crow and nuke something down without fear of being counterattacked. She has, the defense buff from Crow and Aureus to keep her alive, and if she does die, Ruele just brings her back. So it's a very safe comp you can bring into a lot of things, and it's a team that I use pretty frequently in Guild War offense. For RTA, she has a variety of uses as well. She's a phenomenal DPS that can be picked early in both bruiser teams and in, really aggressive teams. This build that I have her on right now is the build I use for RTA. I'm predominantly like a bruiser or tank player, and so you want her fairly thick. I think around 11k HP and 1400 or 1500 defense is where a lot of people have her. She's on lifesteal set. If you build her on speed set, then you could probably bump this to like 1200 HP, or 12,000 HP I mean, and then increase the attack some, since you're getting more stats from the speed set. Speed wise, you want her around 180 to 190. I think that's totally fine to put her at that speed, since you want other people's immunity to fall off so you get value from the stun. You want her to go after your attack buffers, etc., so you want to speed tune her in that way. 100% crit chance and 250 crit damage. I think if you're looking at attack and crit damage for Spec Tenny, try to build more attack if possible, since her passive here, whenever someone on the battlefield dies, she gets a stacking increase on attack and defense. So I think she's going to scale. She's going to scale better with attack. So try to favor attack if you can, once you get to 250 crit damage. So for example, if I could get more offensive stats, I would just start going into attack at this point. The one thing about Spec Tenny is she can be a little hard to build. She has really premium gear right now, and a lot of people don't have this, but a crit chance neck, like I'm running a crit damage neck on her just because it rolled really well, but a crit chance neck is, I think, technically optimal for her because she has no crit chance in her awakenings. So you can see here I'm getting 85% crit chance. To get to 100, she starts at like 15. It's really hard to get her to 100% crit. So you have to have items that, rolled well into crit chance, essentially. And if you don't have those, then running a crit chance neck on her is, I think, the way, since her base crit is low, and you only really need to get her to 250 crit damage. So if you have a crit chance neck, Spectre Tenebria is a great option for that, and building it around. Because she is such a strong character right now in RTA, I think that she is a very valid pick for your ML5 selector if you're at the point of the game where you're expanding your RTA roster. Arbiter Vildrid is a contender for that as well. I think it's going to partly depend on your playstyle. I think many people would choose Spec Tenny over RB. Like for my playstyle, for example, Spec Tenny is way more valuable. Like I have RB and he's nice to have, but if I could only have one, for me it would be Spec Tenny. And that's kind of that's only looking at RTA. That's ignoring the other, like Guild War and PvE, etc. Considerations. So you're going to have to ask yourself where your priorities are. Okay, last up is Judge Kise. There's not a ton to talk about with Judge Kise. She's a waifu, so that is, a thing. For PvE, it does not really have any uses. You could theoretically use her as a farmer. People used to run her in A13 teams, I think, but now we just have like better options. She's a great CP holder for World Boss, since she's a light, hero, and it's sometimes hard to get light heroes with really high CP, since a lot of them are like Knights and Soul Weavers and stuff. So if you're struggling with World Boss, consider Judge Kise. Her main uses are on PvP, like Arena and Guild War offense. You can pair her with a CR booster like Alots and Cleave. So a really popular team for a long time was Judge Kise, thank you Crypto, Judge Kise with Alots and Challenger Dominial. And you would run those three, and then typically like Watcher Shuri in the 4th slot, or somebody else depending on what the enemy team was, like Green Vildrid or a cleanup hero, something like that. And you could cleave pretty far in RTA, and you can still do that. The problem is that people are getting so tanky these days, it's tough to pull that off. And also Politis came along and made Alots like kind of dead in Arena offense. It's like really hard to use him, with that old setup because of Politis. So I just kind of have her built on like the Destro gear from Arena and stuff, just as a CP holder for World Boss. But if you did want to use her, you could use a similar setup as I have now. Getting 100% crit chance would be ideal, of course. And then you're just going to want as much attack and crit damage as you can possibly get. Portrait on her would be a perfectly viable choice. I think she may be a contender for a unit to get buffed, just because she's kind of not really used right now. I wouldn't use that as a justification to take her for your Moonlight selector, but it's something to keep an eye on in the future, perhaps. I'm not sure how long. I guess we probably have like an indefinite amount of time before we have to pick the hero from the connector. So you could, if you have the other heroes, just wait and see if Judge Kise gets buffed. And if she doesn't get buffed after a cycle or two, maybe just pick another one for an imprint or something, or the coins. if you're in a position where you have all the other ones. Yeah, I think she's probably a skip for the most part, though, unless they change something, since she's just not really used right now. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. Those are the 6 heroes that people will have an option for taking. Myself, I think I would either be taking Arby for an imprint or Spectre Tenebria to build a second one. I think that my Spectre Tenebria is built right now as a bruiser, and I think it could be cool to have a second one and build her really offensively, like cut some of this health and a ton of the defense for just way more attack and maybe a teeny bit more speed. Get her to like 4k attack or something so she hits like a truck, I think would be an option, and that would help me draft her in an offensive setup. Because right now, if I do that with like Basar and Arby and stuff, I can bring my Spec Tenny, but I feel like she doesn't hit hard enough to really be used well in that scenario. That's like a super late game consideration though. I may just take an Arby for another imprint. Also a viable choice. So let me know in the comments below who you think you will select. It's pretty exciting to be able to choose one of these heroes. And I hope, if you've been waiting for Arby or Spec Tenny for ages, now is your chance. So I think that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Later.